We are using the pumpkin patch set, which is new in the holiday mini catalog. And I really like it because there's a lot of different designs and things for the pumpkins that you can use to make cool little Halloween cards or just autumn cards in general. So I'm going to use a couple of those pieces. And what I did is I created, out of Post-it notes, the sticky section. I created some, I stamped right onto the Post-it note, and I cut that out so that once I stamp this image on my piece of paper, I'm able to cover it up so that I can layer things over the top of that. And you're going to see exactly what I mean in just a second. I'm just going to take a piece of Whisper White cardstock, and I have a piece of pumpkin pie that's going to be layered onto next. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to stamp a couple of my images. And the first one that I want to do is my center image, because that's the one that I either want to be the focus of all of my attraction here on this card, or it's the one I'm going to have covered up. So I'm going to stamp one of my pumpkins into the pumpkin pie ink. Make sure that I get it nice and inked up. And I'm just going to, as much as possible, get that into the center of my cardstock. Just like that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, like I told you earlier, I stamped onto a Post-it note. And what I did is I just cut that out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set that right over the top of the image that I just stamped. And this is that actual masking technique that I was speaking about earlier. And what that does is it allows for me to stamp over the top without it actually stamping on top of the image I stamped. So it's going to make it look like the other pumpkins are sitting behind the image that I just covered up. Okay, I'm going to take one of my other stamps and I'm going to stamp that into the Dusty Durango. I really, really love this new orange color. I'm a big fan of orange. And what I'm going to do is just, I'm personally just going to slightly overlap it. And then the last one I'm going to stamp into the apricot peel. And I'm going to overlap that on the other side. And then when I pull off my Post-it note, you'll see that it looks like those other pumpkins are sitting right behind the first pumpkin. I'm going to take one of the faces. There are 3 faces that you can put to make your pumpkin a jack-o'-lantern. And I'm just going to stamp that into some chocolate chip ink. And the only pumpkin that I wanted a face on was the center one. So I'm just going to stamp that. And then I also have some options for the pumpkin topper that sticks out of the top of the pumpkin. And I could do all different kinds of things with this. I can turn it upside down. I think I will for this one. And then there's a spiral vine looking topper that I can use. And that's what I'm going to do for that. Now that I'm finished with this image, I'm going to put a little adhesive on the back. And I'm going to layer it onto my pumpkin pie cardstock. I want to make sure that there's a little margin around all of the edges this time. And I'm going to set that aside temporarily. The last piece that I have before we put everything together is to take a couple of scrap pieces of paper. And what I wanted to do was create a word or sentiment section, but I wanted to do it in a nice way without necessarily stamping it right directly onto my card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a scrap piece of pumpkin pie, and I'm going to take my 1 3/4 inch punch, and I really like to punch everything where the opening is at the top. That way I can see that I didn't accidentally cut off some of my image. So I can see right where that is, and I can hopefully save a little paper. So I'm going to set this up to the side, and then I'm going to take the Whisper White, just a scrap piece. You can see that we've used this a piece already. This is a great way to use up scraps of paper. I always save every scrap that I have so that I'm able to use this and not have to use a nice clean sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock. And I'm going to take our 1 3/8 inch circle punch and do the exact same thing that I did before. Now this is nice because I can just right up to the edge and I'm not wasting a lot of paper. I'm going to set that off to the side. And what I want to do is I want to stamp my image onto the Whisper White first. And what I'm going to be using is the Teeny Tiny Wishes set. And there's a nice Happy Halloween phrase in here that I wanted to use. Now, you can see on this set that Happy Halloween goes all the way across this stamp. And for mine, I don't think it will fit all the way across from my circle. So what I want to do is I want to use a Stampin' Right marker in Pumpkin Pie, and I'm going to individually color in those words so that I can do separate sentiments. So I'm going to take, and I like to use the broad edge that looks more like a marker and not the actual writing tool to color. And I like to use the side of my marker because it makes the tips last a little longer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the side, and I'm going to just go over that happy. Set this up to the side. And then I want to kind of make sure that I'm not going too far up because some of this is going to get covered up. And it doesn't have to be in the center if you don't want it to be. So you see I just stamped happy. Now in most cases I would be rinsing this off and make sure everything's good. But in this case I can just stamp it off on my paper, and if I don't see it, most of the time it's alright. Especially for such a small image. Now this time I'm going to go back over and I'm going to color in the Halloween. And now this one, I like to kind of get down on that level and make sure that I'm getting it right, because I don't want to overlap and I don't want to cut off any of my words. I really like the Teeny Tiny Wishes set because there's many, many different sentiments that you can use. Now there's a lot of space in between, and some of you may not be happy with that. I'm okay with it right now. If I weren't, I could just flip over my circle and I could try again. The beauty of scraps is that usually there are many. Alright, now I'm going to layer this onto my pumpkin pie circle, and I'm going to put all of my card together. And I like to do all the parts separately, because then if I mess something up, I don't have to completely take apart my whole card. So I'm going to come back over with my apricot. This is the base of my card. And I'm going to put some adhesive on the back of this original piece that I did with the ribbon. You can use as much or as little adhesive as possible. Remember, if you use too little, sometimes the pieces of your cards may not stick well. And actually, I kind of have to do two things at once. I'm going to put some adhesive on the back of those circles as well, because the circles are going to get covered up a little bit by here. So I'm going to kind of just line it up a little bit, because that way I'll know how to place. And actually, I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive on this top piece here. Whoops. That way it will stick to this. And I kind of want to cover it up a little bit, just to create a little bit of interest. It's a nice way to play with some of your punches. We don't always think of not fully using them for how they were intended. And I kind of want to just line it up so that I have a little bit of space on the bottom and on the sides. That sticks nice. And then I'm going to take the last element, which was the pumpkins, and I'm going to put some adhesive on the back of this. Another option for you would be to use dimensionals to make it pop up and give it a little bit of dimension. And I'm just going to layer this on top of that piece, just slightly over the top of that ribbon. And this should be how your final card looks. This is our pumpkin patch masking technique.